Good morning, good morning. And this week we start work on the Mishkan. Well, we don't start work because we started work last year and got quite a little bit into it. We actually discussed the construction of the Ark and got through pretty much all of it. So I'm going to, the next thing, as you'll see, is this table that was also there. So let me go to the share screen. And what I think I'm going to do, if I can find it, one moment. Okay, I was hoping to be able to share my web because I have pictures from the web there. But I could also, all right, if I can't do that, then I can do something else. I'm going to just, let's start off with a bracha, and that might help. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
All right, so let me see what I can do to possibly share what's on my computer. Let's see. There we go. All right, let's see. Well, that's not helping me. This is interesting and frustrating too, because normally I can absolutely share what's on my computer. And this is not allowing me to do this for some reason.
Is it mine?
No, I don't think so. Hold on a second. 1 second. Sorry about the technical difficulties here.
Is somebody else hosting by accident?
No, I'm sure I am. It's not, no, I can share. That's not the problem. It's what's showing on my screen share. And normally it shows pretty much everything that's on my screen. And so I have, let me try something else. Yeah. So normally I can share my, videos and things, and those are from my web. And it's not, for some reason, it's not, oh, there we are. Let's try this. This is helpful. Do this. How's that?
There it is.
Wow.
This is the table. This is the table. Now, there are clearly different opinions as to how the table was constructed. So this essentially, and I could possibly give you larger pictures, just some different pictures, but this is the showbread that they're talking about, and there's supposed to be 6 on one side and 6 on the other side. It's not my, here, this is what I have learned in the past. That's in my book that we were referring to.
What book is that?
It's called The Tabernacle. It's by, I think it's Rabbi Moshe Cohen, I think is his name. And
Do you recommend that one?
well, it's the classic. But I haven't seen the art scroll, so I don't want to not say that the art scroll isn't worth looking at.
If you can get that one, last time we saw it on Amazon, it was about $400.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's a collector now.
So here we go. Let me take this one for a second. There, this gives, sorry.
All the synagogues got them like eons ago.
What happened there? Let's go back. There we go. So here's a lovely, so this is in the part of the construction. This is helpful, right?
How to, yes.
Yeah, but in fact, you see that there's this board here that's placed on this frame. What you don't see in this particular picture, and what you do see in the book that I'm referring to, and is that this is set on top of this, and then you have this here, this framework going there. And let's see if I can get some other good. Did the picture just get larger for you as well?
Which one?
Just the whole frame, everything. I like this one. Let's try this again. There we are. Is that a large picture for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
But you're losing the screen on that.
There we are. Do you see the screen now?
Yeah.
So look carefully at this, please. Do you see that there are these poles that stand up? Unfortunately, there's not the bottom of the poles. In the book, again, that I'm referring to, they all sort of start at a base and then sort of spread out into three. And there are actually three on each side, according to the book that I have. But also look very carefully. Under each pan, so each loaf goes in one of these pans. And notice carefully, you can barely see it, but you see that these canes, two canes that then fit between the two poles, and then there's a pan that's placed on those canes, and then the bread's put inside of that. But you can see that there are many opinions that don't go like that. So, for example, many that don't. Sorry, I don't know what it. Oh, yeah, you should be able to see that. Okay. That do it differently, and I don't see. Sadly, I don't have a single picture on here that comes from that book that I referred to. Oh, this is important. This picture here, I'm going to see if I can enlarge that for you.
No.
I know. It's being recalcitrant. There we are.
Okay, location.
Here we go. This here, okay, so this basically is supposed to represent the enclosure of the tabernacle. And this is giving you sort of a bird's eye view. This was the actual tabernacle itself. It had boards and covers. It was a tent, essentially. This would be the Holy of Holies here. This was the holy place. And what I wanted you to notice is that you had the table over here. This would be on the north side. This would be the south side. This would be east. This would be west. And so this altar was actually placed in the middle between the two. This was the altar on which they burnt incense. And here was the golden menorah. This is a very poor representation. Would anybody like to tell us why is this a very poor representation of the menorah?
9 branches? Really?
Correct. Very good. Yes. It looks like a Hanukkah menorah. And I'm sorry, I think Chanukiot are a relatively modern, came on the scene in a fairly modern place. They're not mentioned in the Talmud at all. They basically would put a lamp next to each other so that they had 8 lamps. And they may have had another lamp to light the others. But this has an extra branch that should not be there. There should only be 7. So this is really, the person who did this was not being careful. Then this was a cloth that covered the door of the tent of meeting. This was a bronze laver in which the priests would wash their hands and their feet. This is correct. This is the outer court. And this was the bronze altar on which they offered up the sacrifices. All right. So this is important so that you get to see the location of these various items, the furniture of the tabernacle. I have probably mentioned this last year, but I'm going to mention it again this year. Because you can find all the last ones if you look under, I believe it's under Tabernacle or Mishkan, excuse me, or Truma, excuse me, under Truma. I believe it's Trumah. If you do a search under Truma, you'll find last year's on my YouTube page. You'll find last year's lessons up to where we get now. Just personally, I want to tell you that when I get to this part of the Torah, it was so hard to understand without the pictures. The book that I found that we've talked about was so helpful in realizing what a beautiful and amazing piece of engineering this was as well, so that it could be portable around the desert. Many years later, I was reading a commentary, and the commentary was illuminating in that the commentator, and his name will come to me in a moment, relatively modern commentary, I would say 19th century, late 19th century perhaps, which gave me an understanding of why this is relevant. It is so easy to just throw this into saying, okay, well, whatever, and to realize that actually it is supposed to be a model for ourselves. Something I realized much earlier on independently is that the menorah itself represents the face. Some of you may remember this from previous lessons that I've given, and that the actual configuration of the menorah represents a person's head. These two forget this, of course. Let's see, I can maybe find a better picture of a menorah for you. Let me, 1 second. I'll see if I can do this. See if this works. Thank you. This is probably how it looked. This is a nice one of it. Oh, well, you can purchase them, I suppose. But here, this is what it kind of looked like. 7 branches. This would represent the ears. This would represent the eyes. This would represent the nostrils. And this would represent the mouth. And this basically represents one's neck. So that the menorah is actually, if you think about it, ears, eyes, nose, mouth, there are 7 ways or I suppose we could actually say 4 ways in which we directly make contact to this world, to the physical world around us. So that was something that I realized. Having said that, let's go back. See if I can just go back. Right here. That the tabernacle itself, and this was in this commentary, that the tabernacle actually represents the human being. This being the cranial cavity, this being the rest of the head, this, of course, the Ark and the Torah, right, with the 10 Commandments being on our minds, within our brains. Again, some of these representing the mouth, the food. This represents food. This represents a very spiritual, perhaps spirituality. This represents, in terms of the body, this represents the outer altar where they burnt off the sacrifices, would represent our digestive system. And so the idea that this being a model of how we should be, each one of us now becomes a place in which the divine presence can rest. And so again, the whole purpose, or one of the major purposes of the discipline of Judaism, is to help us become receptacles and a place for the divine presence to come into the world. And you realize, of course, that when you are performing a mitzvah, remember, mitzvah means a command. And when you perform a mitzvah, you're taking something that we believe emanates from a divine source, and you are actually bringing it into physical existence. You're transforming it into the world. And in that sense, you're acting like the temple or the tabernacle, which was a physical location where the divine presence could enter into the world. And I think this is a profound thought and a really great answer to why are we here? And to understand that the reason why God created human beings is that he wanted a partner, in a sense, to be able to bring that divine presence into this world, and how the world might be transformed if we actually acted that way. So, in a sense, I've given you the reason why this is something so precious and for us, and the fact that as we're now moving into the later parts of Exodus, and that as we get to these parts of Exodus, they are filled with the plans for the tabernacle, the construction of the different parts of the tabernacle, the putting together of the tabernacle, the accounts of the various materials that went into the tabernacle. We read its construction many times as we get through to the end of Exodus. So I'm going to stop this share and we're going to go to the text now. See if I can find it. This lesson that I have just given you took many, many years for me to realize. So, v'asita shulchan atzei shitim. You should. So this is the first time we are mentioning the construction of this tabernacle. I'll translate the sentence, but I'm going to give you one other background piece of information. You shall make a table out of acacia wood. Amatayim orko, 2 cubits its length, va'ama rochbo, and 1 cubit its width, va'ama v'chetzi komato, and 1 cubit and 1/2 its height. I think a handy rule of thumb for a cubit to give you a sense of its size is 18 inches. There are many discussions and disagreements as to the exact measurement of a cubit, but that is a good average understanding and definitely gives you a sense. And we know one thing we do know is that a cubit is basically the length from your elbow to the tip of your middle finger. That is a cubit. So this, we could then, using that, we could give it modern dimensions. So I want to back up one more and share that piece of introduction. We notice where this happens. And the rabbis were very conscious that this happens after the Jewish people are willing to accept the Torah. And there's a beautiful, beautiful midrash in which they use a parable. And again, I may have mentioned this parable in previous lessons, but I found it just such a beautiful parable. And that is the story of a king who had an only daughter, and she became of marriageable age. And there were many suitors who came to see if they could win her over as their bride. And none of them were satisfactory until one suitor came and they fell in love with each other. There was only one problem. The suitor came from a very, very distant country, many days' journey away. And the king adored his daughter and knew that he was going to miss her a great, great deal. And so he said to the suitor, he said, listen, he says, I know that the two of you are in love, and I can see that your personalities match beautifully and that you are going to be a great couple. So do me one favor. You're going to take my daughter and take her back with you to your country. But do me a favor and build for me a little room, a room adjoining the palace, so that whenever I want to come and visit my daughter, I don't have to put you to a lot of trouble, and I can just stop by, and that way I can visit her and visit both of you whenever I like. That's the parable. What's the application? The king is the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he. The daughter is the Torah, and the suitor is the Jewish people. And what happened was that when the Jewish people were willing to accept the Torah, that was the marriage between the suitor and the daughter. And the tabernacle is that little room that God asked the suitor to make so he could come and visit whenever he wanted. And it helps us understand that when we accept the Torah, right, as I was saying before, right, it's a very profound moment because it allows the divine presence to enter the world. If we take this seriously and try to find ways in which to apply this thought into our lives. And of course, the guidebook is the Torah. So that is why the construction of the tabernacle follows the giving of the Torah and the Mishpatim. If you want to know the truth, probably this is plan B. Plan A would have been for the Israelites to enter the land of Canaan, to do the conquest, and ultimately build the temple. That was plan A. But the tabernacle, as it were, is saying that God couldn't wait. God was so moved by the Israelites' acceptance of the Torah that God needed to build the tabernacle, even in the desert, even in the wilderness, and to anticipate the construction of the temple by possibly several hundred years. And just to say, and this, of course, some of you know that when the temple was destroyed in the year 70, that could have been the end of it all, and certainly the end of Judaism, period, because the temple was such a central part of the expression of Jewish religion. And the reason why it didn't, in some ways, is the message of the tabernacle and the fact that God could be with the Jewish people even outside the land of Israel. But essentially in a place where, remember, the wilderness, not a lot of physical comforts, but in a place where people could be spiritually motivated and driven to try and perform whatever commandments they could, because there were many commandments involving the temple service. There were many commandments that are totally based on the land of Israel, cannot be fulfilled outside the land of Israel. And yet there are still many, many other commandments that can be fulfilled anywhere. And what I'm sharing with you, I think, is some of the inner layers of the amazing survival of our religion, of our way of life. So let's go on a little bit more now with all that introduction. There is a little bit of Rashi, komato. So the word koma means gova. He says, this is the height, raglav im ovi hashulchan. This is the height of the legs of the table with the thickness of the table of that board. Remember, I showed you those pictures before, and it was so important for you to see that. So it wasn't just the legs, it was to the top of that board that was a cubit and a half. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to put a marking in here, and we'll go to the next verse with God's help tomorrow. And I'm going to stop the share. Okay. And I'll give you a chance if you want to just react a little bit.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the mountain where God was, Mount Sinai was not holy then. What happened to the people when they built the golden calf? I mean, what I can't understand is, when was the ark built, before or after the golden calf?
Yes, it's a very good question. So the way in which the book of Exodus is organized is the building of the golden calf happens right in between. So in some ways, it's as if, because one of the purposes of the tabernacle and of the sacrifices was to gain atonement, right? We realize just how important it is to be able to recognize that one can make very serious mistakes, but to be able to reconcile. And so I don't know that it was it might be, you might say, that one of the most important elements of the tabernacle was the ability for reconciliation. All right. So the fact that we read about this construction prior to the building of the golden calf, we have this parsha of Truma, and we also have the parsha of Tetzaveh that follows it, that talks about the priestly garments and the significance of the priestly garments. And what is significant about the priestly garments is that every one of those garments of the high priest came to atone for a different major sin. And for example, I believe the breastplate, sorry. There was a special kind of apron, the ephod, that the high priest wore. It was like an apron that you wore backwards. In other words, the wide part of the apron went around the back of the person and it tied in the front. This is next week's parsha that goes into a lot of detail over the ephod. That's what it was called. We don't even have a translation for this particular Hebrew word. And that came to atone for the sin of idolatry. The specific garments and what they atone for, I'm hoping that we are going to see with Rashi, that Rashi's going to explain. So, for example, I believe there was a frontlet that the priest wore that said Kodesh Lashem, holy to Hashem. And again, that would atone for something. I think the special hat that the priest wore might have been an atonement for arrogance. I could be wrong, but I'm just trying to give you examples of various ways in which what the high priest was wearing, his clothing, was actually about atonement. So in a sense, it's as if, okay, so this is, and then of course we have two more parshiot after Ki Tisa, which is the parsha that deals with the golden calf, that also then complete the construction of the tabernacle. And there's a major point in that organization as well, in the fact that even though the sin of the golden calf is like the worst bit of the degree to which the Israelites let down God in such a heavy way. And of course, it's supposed to help us understand ways in which we do the same kind of thing. And yet the construction of the tabernacle doesn't come to an end. The Exodus doesn't end with that section. It ends with two more chapters dealing with construction of the tabernacle to let us know that the degree to which we are loved by God. And one of the things that allows you to understand that is when you really get a mark of who you are as a person, both with your strong side and your dark side. And you recognize your own human weakness and the degree to which you've allowed your own weakness to overcome you. And to recognize that despite that fact, God, you continue another day of your life, you continue to live another day, and you're always given that opportunity to reconcile. And it's terribly important to understand yourself as a human being and to be able to look at your own faults and your own, some of which might be quite serious, and the degree to which you are not living a life that is worthy. Now, I know that the second blessing of the Amidah, right, the one that starts at Gibor and ends with Machayeh HaMeitim, who brings the dead to life. One interpretation that I have of that statement, who brings the dead to life, is a statement that's saying that even though I don't necessarily deserve the life that I have, God sustains me and gives the person who by rights shouldn't be alive life. And that's simply another way of understanding that particular blessing. And I think being able to recognize our faults, to see in which way in which we're not worthy of the life we have, is to say how precious life really is and how amazing it is to be alive in this world, and to be able to not be depressed about it. And that in recognizing that God loves each one of us to such a high degree, if we can recognize that, it can also motivate us to perfect ourselves in the course of whatever number of years God gives us. That's where I'm going to stop today. I'm going to stop the recording, and thank you.